I already know what the comment section is going to be full of, but I'm not going to steal Jeremy Parish's bit. Xevious Fardraut Densetsu is a big game for the PC Engine. Not wildly popular or hugely successful, but one that's interesting for the history involved. The original Xevious was one of the most important games to ever hit Japanese arcades. This vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up was a monster hit. It inspired more developers than I can count to get into the video game industry, and pretty much every shoot-'em-up for the next 5 years copied its formula. When Namco ported Xevious to Nintendo's new family computer game system, it was also an extremely big deal. There's a very good argument to be made that the port of Xevious is what made the Famicom into the monster success that it was. And of course, there were then sequels. Super Xevious in the arcade wasn't much of a sequel, more of an enhanced version for expert players. Super Xevious on the Famicom borrowed elements of Namco's other industry-shaking success, the Tower of Druaga, and it created a more complicated experience for players. Eventually, Namco decided to make a brand new Xevious game. They approached Compile to make it for them, because who better than technical wizards with a history of creating great shoot-'em-ups? The MSX2 version of Xevious, the Fardraut Saga, offered a port of the original arcade game, plus something they called Scramble Mode. That was a rearranged version that lets you pick what ship you were going to fly, and power-ups to improve your ship's weapons. That MSX version of Fardraut Saga is what Compile used as the starting point for the PC Engine Fardraut Saga, but they're not the same game. In fact, the MSX version of Xevious Fardraut Saga is officially the prequel to the PC Engine Xevious Fardraut Saga. And of course, no one was ever confused by this. One more thing before I get into the game itself. The characters used to spell out the title imply that it should be Xevious Fardraut Densetsu, and you'll find places on the English-speaking side of the internet that render the title that way. However, the information on how to pronounce those characters is given as Saga. This is a case of Namco being cute and giving it a double title, but officially, the way you're supposed to say it is Xevious Fardraut Saga. Okay, when you power on the game, you're given the choice between Fardraut or Arcade. And I'm going to start at Arcade. And it's a very good port of the original arcade game. Of course, the screen in the original game was vertically oriented, so this shrinks the play area a bit, but everything else comes through pretty much intact. In the game, you're flying the Solvalo spacecraft against hordes of invading aliens. There's no power-ups, no special weapons, it's just you against them. One of the defining features of Xevious is that you have two different ways of attacking. Pressing button 2 will fire the gun straight ahead, and pressing button 1 will drop a bomb a short distance ahead of you. It'll land where the crosshair is. The aliens in Xevious had fairly complicated attack patterns. The initial ones that you encounter will zoom towards you but then swerve away, while later on they'll take more aggressive postures. The longer that you survive in Xevious, the more difficult that enemies become. What you'll be facing is set in groups, and as you fly without a death, these groups change. Naturally, any contact with a bullet or enemy ship will destroy you, and Xevious uses checkpoints for your progress, though they don't always send you backwards. If you get far enough in a region, then the restart point may actually be a little bit ahead of where you died. Of course, the iconic thing that everyone who's played Xevious knows about are the flying invincible squares. Well, that and the boss at the end of the loop. The Endor Genesis mothership was arguably the first video game boss, and you have to send a bomb right into its core in order to destroy it. That's the gist of Xevious. Naturally, there's a question of how does the PC Engine version compare to the Famicom version? Obviously, the PC Engine version's a bit better, but not as much as you might think. The Famicom version was a really good port, and what the PC Engine version offers are slightly improved graphics, and a few of the nastier enemies that had to be cut from the Famicom version. Of course, you're not playing Xevious Fardraut Saga for the sake of the arcade version. If you bought this package, then you wanted Fardraut mode. And Fardraut mode gives you a story. You've got some fairly long cutscenes when you start the game and between levels. Yes, there are levels. I found claims that the story here is based on the Xevious novels. However, the novels were released a year after this game. It's entirely possible that Compile had access to the notes or even a rough draft of the novel. So it's plausible that the story here is based on that rather than just some loose lore notes that Namco had laying around. I just couldn't find anybody saying anything definitively one way or the other. Of course, the story that we do get is incredibly thin. 16,000 years ago, there was a world-spanning, technically advanced civilization. They built a supercomputer called GAMP. The computer goes crazy and takes over, and only one person in a fighter can go after it. Fardraut Saga has quite a few differences from the original Xevious arcade game, and the most obvious one are the power-ups. These drop from little craft that regularly appear. Initially, you can only get the red R's and W's, but once you reach stage 3, a new set of power-ups become available. The red R's, and later the yellow R's, are for rapid fire. Xevious Fardraut Saga has auto-fire built in, but it's very slow-paced. If you mash really fast, or turn your controller's auto-fire switches on, then you'll easily outpace just holding the button down. However, the number of shots you can fire at once is limited, and that's what increases when you collect the R power-up. The red, or yellow, W stands for wide shot. Now don't get your hopes up, this isn't a spread shot. Instead, it increases the spread between your shots going forward. And as you collect more W's, you'll get some additional forward shots. They will remain very tightly grouped though. From stage 3 on, you can also collect a yellow A, and that destroys all aircraft on screen, including the invincible squares. The real power-up change from stage 3 on, though, is the Zionite. Collect the blue A, R, or W, and 2 crystals will fly in to protect your craft. If you collect the R, then they'll spin around your ship. If you collect the A, then they'll position themselves slightly in front of you, and the W will restore them to full health. These crystals will act as shields and destroy any enemies they come into contact with, including the invincible squares. Yeah, they're not so invincible in this game. The Zionite is very helpful for dealing with the dense enemy attack patterns in the later half of Xevious Fardraut Saga. The power-ups in Xevious Fardraut Saga fall under the category of nice to have, but not required, and they really don't change the game's Xevious flavoring. At the end of a long stage, there's a boss. Naturally, the first boss is one of Compile's favorite, a big base sitting around and shooting at you. You need to bomb the core multiple times in order to defeat it. If you win, then you go to a new stage where you have a new ship. The Andor Genesis appears on the second level, but it's not the boss. Once you blow it up, you just continue on. There are 4 stages in all in Fardraut Saga, and these stages are relatively long and actually kind of difficult. The enemy patterns are a lot more aggressive here, and there will be situations where you'll have a hard time finding a gap. On top of that, I suspect that the bomb has been tweaked to make it much less effective. In the arcade mode, getting close is good enough to get a bomb hit, but it feels like in Fardraut Saga, you have to hit things dead on. Now, one positive thing here is that there's infinite continues. Once you get a game over, just pick Fardraut Saga again, and it'll let you choose what stage you want to start on. But just because you're not sent back to the beginning after 3 failures, doesn't mean that it's really possible to power your way through. If you want to clear this one, you're going to have to get good. In Japan, Xevious Fardraut Saga is very well regarded. In fact, based on the comments I was seeing, I'd say it was the most popular of the Xevious sequels. I found a lot of people calling this out as something that they love, especially the music. Which is kind of funny because the music's my one complaint. I found the second stage music loop to be really grating. If you can survive that and get to the third stage, then the music's great. It's just that one stage's music really hurts my ears. But still, I really like this version of Xevious. You can feel its age. It's kind of simple for a 1990 game, but from the compressed perspective of decades later, this is a really fun expansion on classic Xevious. I think any Xevious fan would be thrilled to play it.